Reaching the world number one position in men's tennis has always represented far more than just a ranking beside a player's name, because it stands as proof of sustained excellence, mental durability, physical dominance, and the ability to survive an entire season while being hunted by every rival in the sport. Since the introduction of the ADP rankings in 1973, only a remarkably small group of athletes have ever managed to reach the summit of the tennis world, with just 29 men having earned that honor across more than 5 decades of professional competition. Standing at the very top even once requires a rare balance of talent, discipline, resilience, and timing, but finishing a season as world number one is an even more brutal test of greatness, because it demands consistency from January through December, across surfaces, continents, climates, and pressure moments. Even more astonishing than the small number of players who have reached the top is the microscopic number of men who have managed to finish multiple seasons as year-end world number one. Only 11 players in the entire history of men's tennis have been able to repeat that achievement more than once, which places them in a category that exists beyond championships and trophies. These are players who defined eras, broke rivals mentally, and turned tennis courts into territory they controlled with authority. Entering the year 2025, another name has now joined this almost mythical group, and that name belongs to Carlos Alcaraz. At only 22 years old, Carlos has officially finished more than one season as the year-end world number one, placing him among the greatest figures the sport has ever produced while still standing at the very beginning of his prime. Bjorn Borg at number 11 stands as one of the earliest symbols of this rare dominance, a player whose icy composure earned him the nickname that perfectly captured his mental presence under pressure. During the late 1970s, Borg dismantled the control that Jimmy Connors had held over the tour, reshaping the competitive landscape with a calm intensity that felt both surgical and overwhelming. Year-end number one finishes in 1979 and 1980 solidified his reign. And even more haunting is the fact that he stepped away from the sport at the astonishingly young age of 26. Retirement at such a young stage froze his legacy in time and left behind a question that remains unanswered decades later, centered around how many more seasons he might have dominated if exhaustion and expectation had not driven him away. Peak years compressed into such a short window amplified the legacy he left behind. Next, at number 10, we have Stefan Edberg, who embodied a very different form of dominance, built not from raw intimidation, but from elegance, courage, and tactical sophistication. Rising to the top of the rankings in 1990 and successfully closing that season as world number one, Edberg proved that precision and intelligence could bend matches to his will. 1991 brought an even more dramatic battle for the throne, where he edged Boris Becker in one of the tightest and most emotionally charged ranking races the sport had ever witnessed. Serve and volley mastery became his signature, as he consistently moved forward to finish points with confidence and clarity. 2 consecutive year-end finishes at number one were not simply results of talent, but of trust in a game style that demanded bravery in every rally. Leighton Hewitt at number 9 arrived on the tour as a storm of speed, spirit, and fearless intensity, becoming the youngest player in history to reach the world number one ranking before the arrival of Alcaraz. Triumph during the 2001 season and retention of that dominance through 2002 showed a mindset built on refusal to be outworked or mentally pushed aside. Relentless chasing of every ball, combined with sharp anticipation, turned him into a problem that opponents simply hated to face. Back-to-back year-end number one finishes across those 2 years confirmed that youth, when combined with fire and intelligence, could overwhelm more established names. Carlos Alcaraz at number 8 now stands among those legends as the most modern addition to this elite circle. Capturing year-end number one status in 2022 at just 19 years old already felt like an event that would define a generation. But returning to that position again in 2025 at only 22 elevated the moment to something historically unprecedented. Achieving multiple year-end number one seasons at such a young age makes him the youngest player ever to do so, creating a sense that history is unfolding in real time. Positioning among the all-time greats before reaching the traditional prime years of a tennis career signals a future that appears limitless. Every tournament he plays now carries the weight of expectation not just to win, but to define the era. John McEnroe at number 7 represented a dramatic shift in dominance, moving from 2 consecutive finishes to a stretch of 4 consecutive seasons at the summit. Between 1981 and 1984, McEnroe built one of the most dominant streaks in tennis history, not necessarily by holding number one every single week, but by ensuring that when the season ended, his name stood above all others. Combination of genius on the court and volcanic intensity off, it made his presence unforgettable. Four consecutive year-end #1 finishes symbolized a player who could impose both technical brilliance and psychological pressure. Ivan Lendl, who is at #6, followed that era with a more calculated and physically demanding vision of dominance. Beginning in 1985, continuing through full calendar years of control in 1986 and 1987, and returning to the summit again in 1989, Lendl showed that discipline could be just as powerful as flair. Focus on physical fitness, heavy topspin baselining, and structure strategy created a new blueprint that heavily influenced the modern baseline game. Seasonal finishes at #1 during these years reflected systematic superiority rather than emotional momentum. Rafael Nadal stands at #5, introduced a new form of dominance built on resilience, reinvention, and survival. Year-end #1 finishes in 2008, 2010, 2013, 2017, and 2019 stretched across more than a decade of competition, proving that greatness could be sustained through adaptation rather than perfection. Injuries, surface transitions, and evolving rivals never erased his presence at the highest level. Career narrative demonstrated that true dominance is not only about winning, but about returning stronger each time circumstances attempt to dismantle momentum. Standing as the only other Spaniard besides Carlos Alcaraz to achieve multiple year-end #1 finishes tied generations together through national legacy. Roger Federer at #4 balanced Nadal as both rival and equal in legacy, dominating a golden era of tennis through elegance, precision, and an almost poetic sense of timing. For consecutive year-end #1 finishes from 2004 through 2007 created a stretch that many consider one of the most untouchable periods in the sport's history. Returning to the top again in 2009 showed that brilliance was not limited to a single chapter. 5 year-end #1 finishes across a historically competitive period represented artistry paired with ruthless efficiency. Jimmy Connors at #3 enforced his authority through raw intensity and relentless hunger. A sequence of 5 straight year-end #1 finishes from 1974 to 1978 created a standard that defined American tennis for years to come. Complete control of full calendar years in 1975, 1976, and 1978 displayed domination beyond single tournaments, extending across entire seasons. Personality combined with physical durability helped shape the emotional energy that would later influence future American champions. Pete Sampras at #2 transformed the 1990s into his personal kingdom. 6 consecutive year-end #1 finishes from 1993 through 1998 established a benchmark so strong that many believed it could never be surpassed. Delivery under pressure, unmatched serve efficiency, and the ability to remain calm in moments of extreme importance separated him from nearly every rival of his era. Championships were not taken through emotion, but through inevitability, building a reputation grounded in silence, focus, and destruction of opposition through controlled excellence. Novak Djokovic stands alone at the summit of ranking greatness. 8 year-end #1 finishes, achieved across 2011, 2012, 2014, 2015, 2018, 2020, 2021, and 2023, reflect not just longevity, but the ability to dominate through multiple eras of competition. Accumulating 428 total weeks at world #1 represents a level of supremacy that redefined what was once considered physically and mentally possible. Dominating during Federer's prime, Nadal's relentless resistance, and now emerging threats like Alcaraz shows adaptability that borders on historical perfection. Remaining relevant and dangerous across changing playing styles and new generations has carved a legacy unmatched in the sport. Recognition of the 11 men who have achieved multiple year-end #1 finishes paints a story far beyond numbers. Borg's frozen steel, McEnroe's fire, Sampras' calm power, Federer's elegance, Nadal's warrior heart, Djokovic's machine-like endurance, and now Alcaraz's youthful storm all create a chain of lineage that defines tennis history. Entry of Carlos Alcaraz into this legendary structure raises a question that lingers over the sport like electricity in the air. Speculation naturally turns toward how far his journey can reach and what number he may ultimately attach to his name by the end of his career. Chase towards Sampras' 6 and Djokovic's 8 now feels real rather than hypothetical. Observers across the globe now witness the beginning of a legacy that could reshape future conversations around dominance. Closing thoughts leave one question hanging for every fan and every generation yet to come, centered around the number of seasons Carlos Alcaraz will finish as the undisputed king of the tennis world. Legacy remains unfinished, story remains unwritten, and history appears wide open.